Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Vamsi. I'm a prospective medical student at NUS's Young Lowland School of Medicine, and I'll be matriculating this August. So if you guys are successful in getting into medical school, I will probably see some of your faces actually. Through this video, I would like to guide you through the entire application process for the different medical schools in Singapore and help to condense a lot of information out there. When I was applying back in 2019, it was just also confusing. I didn't know what to look out for, what is important, how to prepare for interviews, what terms like BMAT and SJT even meant. So I would like to answer some of these questions and hopefully you will find this video helpful. A bit more about me. I applied to NUS Medical School back in 2019 right after my A-levels and was fortunate enough to have been offered a place. I, for specific reasons, chose to not defer and complete my national service, so that's why I'm matriculating this year in 2021. If you guys are interested why I chose to do that, leave comments below. I can probably even explain to you guys in another video. Let's get straight into what we want to do today. I've broken down the video into 5 segments. Number 1 will be the basic structure of all the medical schools in Singapore, and I'd like to give you guys a general breakdown of what it is. Number 2, I'll talk about the grades that are required of you, and the last 3 segments will be tailored to each individual medical school. So I'll be going through NUS in depth, then just copying over the principles for NTU and DUKE-NUS Medical School. I'll put up the timestamps over here on my left, so I'll try to figure that out. I'm still a new YouTuber and everything. So let's just get started. There are 3 medical schools in Singapore. NUS's Young Lowland School of Medicine, there's NTU's Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine, which is a partnership between NTU and Imperial College of London in the UK. And finally, we have the DUKE-NUS Medical School, which is a partnership between NUS and Duke University in the United States. The main differences between these 3 schools is that for DUKE-NUS, it's a graduate level entry course, so meaning you have to complete a bachelor's degree or undergraduate degree before going into the medical school. There's no specific requirement of what you have to pursue before applying to DUKE-NUS Medical School. You can pursue from anything from law to life sciences to engineering and really everything, right? It's a 4-year course and you have to take either of these tests, which are graduate medical school admissions test or the medical college admission test, which are GAMSAT and MCATs respectively. So this is different from the other 2 schools, which are undergraduate level entry programs. They are both 5 years long, slightly longer so that they have more time to get used to the medical system and everything. Apart from that, NTU is different from NUS in that sense that NTU requires you to take the biomedical admission test. So NUS doesn't require this. So all these differences lined up over here, it's quite simple to see. That's that for the breakdown, so let's just move on. Before I move on, I would just like to mention that I'll be focusing more on the undergraduate level schools, NUS and NTU over DUKE-NUS Medical School, because that is just something I'm more familiar with. So let's talk about grades. Fortunately or unfortunately, grades do matter when you apply to medical school. In fact, they matter a lot. So for you to even be called to an interview, your grades have to meet the cutoff point that is set by each individual school. My friend was nice enough to do up this table of the various cutoff points. So this is across the last 3 years from 2018 to 2020. So as you can see, for A-levels, you require around 87.5 to meet the SAFE benchmark. Personally, I got an 87.5 and I got into medical school. So these cutoff points are legit. And for IB, you require around 42, and as a polygrad, you require a 3.92 GPA. For NTU, it's still unknown. As you can see, it's nil. Not because no one got in, it's more because we didn't have enough data to actually write it down. We do know of people who actually got in to NTU's medical school as a polygrad, so don't be disheartened and make your shot at the application. So that's a prerequisite for both medical schools for you to be even called down for the interview stage. So they will look at your profile, your achievements, what exactly you did, your personal statement, and your grades. But for NTU, they take one more step. They look at your BMAT scores. So the BMAT scores also have a minimum cutoff point. I'll put it up here also. Basically, for section 1, you require around 4.8, then section 2 you require around 5.2, section 3, 3.0, and honestly, the section 3 writing grade is quite easy to achieve. You should be having an A, it's quite easy to attain. Yeah, so that's just basic cutoff points, right? So this might change this year. Use this just as a guide to see where you stand in the entire application process. But the best thing you can do if your grades kind of make it, just make the application. So now that we talked about various cutoff points and the various grades that are required of you, some of you will be asking me, what if I didn't make these cutoff points, or you're afraid of not making the cutoff point for this year? There is actually a scheme called the Aptitude-based Admissions scheme, so which is in short ABAS. It was formerly known as the Exceptional Individual Scheme. So it looks out for people who have amazing extracurricular records. They have amazing achievements in the national and international level in specific spaces of like community service, leadership, sporting achievements, arts and theatre, research, and even in your national service. So for example, if you are like a commando officer, you have an amazing chance at this scheme. The good thing about this is that you won't be disadvantaged in any way. For instance, if I have 86.25 and I'm unsure whether the cutoff will drop to 86.25 this year, I will choose to actually apply through the ABS scheme. For instance, if I actually participated in an International Science Engineering Fair, this scheme is an amazing opportunity for me because it will shed some light on the different aspects of me, not just my grades. So initially what happens is when you apply, you'll be considered like a standard applicant, and when you don't meet a cutoff point, then only will you be considered as a ABAS applicant. So then they will start digging into what your achievements are, what sports you did, what kind of competitions you participated in, and things like that. So what I'm trying to get at essentially is applying through the ABS scheme won't hurt you in any way. If you're unsure and you have amazing achievements, I would recommend you to apply through this scheme. The only bad thing about this scheme is that the deadlines are much earlier. So it's around 9th March compared to 19th March. So you have to do a bit of rushing because by the time I publish this video, I think it's going to be quite close to the deadline itself. Now that we understand the basic structure of the medical schools in Singapore, the grades that are required for it, and even this aptitude-based admission scheme, which is different from the standard scheme, let's dive straight into the specific application processes for each of the medical school. So I'll start with NUS. When you apply for NUS medical school, you need to do two main things. One, make a general application with NUS admissions itself. So you'll be ranking different courses depending on what you want. So for example, you want to rank medicine first, second dentistry, life sciences, engineering, something like that. The only catch is you need to, if you're interested in applying medicine, you need to put it as your first or your second choice. So the second step you have to make is submit a medicine portfolio with the School of Medicine. Here is where you put in all your list of achievements, your personal statement, your referee reports, and things like that. Okay, so this is what I'll be focusing on. One of the first things that they require you to do is actually put out 10 of your most significant extracurriculars that you wish your interviewer to see, right? It can be things like your A-Star Science Award, it can be things like your SYM Gold, your leadership position in your various CCAs, were you like the Dragon Boat captain, were you the rugby captain? So pick out the top 10 of your most recent. So I would advise you to pick from Sec 3 onwards. So beyond that will be outdated. The thing about this is you actually don't have to fill up all 10. I have friends who actually filled up only about 8, 7 and still got in. As long as you keep them to around 6 to 7, it's actually a decent amount already. One of the first things people ask me is, do you have to build up a portfolio for a medical school? Like, do you have to exaggerate a lot of things? Do you have to like purposely go down to volunteer and job shadow just to put it in this list of achievements? The answer is surprisingly no. So let's talk about facts. I have friends who actually got in without even volunteering ever in a hospital. never shadowed a doctor or anything before, essentially you don't need to have much healthcare experience to really even get into medical school, right? The bar is actually not very high, that's what I'm trying to get at. But what I urge you to do is actually do those things if possible, because it's not for the application itself, but it's for you, because doing things like volunteering, probably embarking on a research project or job shadowing on a doctor are amazing opportunities for you to find out more about the healthcare world. Studying medicine is like a lifelong commitment. Being a doctor is very challenging and it's not for everyone. So you want to make sure that is a profession that is something that you like pursuing for the next, let's say, 20 years of your life. So exposing yourself with these kind of opportunities is an amazing way for you to find out whether it is really a good fit for you. Considering the entire pandemic situation, I understand that it's not possible for some of you guys to volunteer or shadow doctors right now. So I urge you to actually read a lot of books, because it really captures the essence of the healthcare world very well. The books that I would recommend you are Deep Medicine, Knife's Edge, Being Mortal, When Breath Becomes Air. So these are amazing books which I definitely recommend you to read. Beyond reading books, you can actually also talk to your family doctor, ask him about their experiences. Sure, it may be outdated, but the thing is, understanding perspectives of doctors in the healthcare field is also an important way for you to get a glimpse of the healthcare world before even stepping into it. All in all, the list of achievements, you don't have to have a fascinating list unless you're applying under the Aptitude-based Admissions scheme. If you're under the standard scheme, having a general list, copying over your CCA records is perfectly fine. And now we move on to the personal statement. It's one of those first things that the interviewer sees and gets an impression of you beyond your grades, your achievements, which are some things that almost every applicant has when you apply to medical school. It's highly important for you to add a touch of yourself with every single word. For NUS Medicine, you have around 500 words to play around with. So one of the first things I urge you to do is to find resources online and make full use of it. So for me, what I did was use a lot of YouTube videos on how to craft a personal statement for medical schools and reading through model personal statements online. One of those best things I read was Ali Abdal's personal statement. It was very elegantly crafted, so he tailored every single experience back to medicine and made sure every experience brought in a new insight about the medical world that he previously didn't know about. So if you ask me what my tips are to craft the personal statement, I would narrow it down to 2 specific tips. Number 1, I want you to break down your interest of being a doctor or the interest in the healthcare world into specific parts. What worked for me is to understand what I really love or liked about being a doctor. That came down to the emotional bond within doctors and patients, the problem-solving aspect of being a doctor, and also lastly, I loved the science aspect of it, so the human physiology, the anatomy, and really understanding how our bodies function. So till this point, it's still very general. So how you tailor these reasons to your experiences is what that makes your personal statement unique. So you need to make sure every single experience that you have explains in a certain way your love for a specific part of the healthcare field. So for example, if you want to talk about the problem-solving skills aspect of being a doctor, you can talk about the time you shadowed an A&E doctor and how every single patient that comes in is a new case and you really have to employ your critical thinking skills. You have to use various sets of data, take vital signs, and understand what the patient has been doing for the past couple of days to lead him to the current point. It's really like a mystery that you want to unravel. That's something interesting, right? So that makes your personal statement unique. But it doesn't really even have to be that fancy, you see. It can be something as simple as, okay, you love the science aspect of studying medicine. So explain that, care to elaborate why exactly you love it. So for example, cutting a sheep's heart back in Sec 3, I realized how intricate each organ is, or each tissue or cell, and how you loved the intricacy of it. You love the complexity of each organ and you want to understand more about it. And you pursued these other things, academic competitions or this research to do exactly that. And you thought that wasn't enough. So you want to go into medical school to really continue doing this. So that is actually amazing. That shows passion, that shows interest. So that's exactly what you want to do. You don't want to just go out there and say, I want to study medicine because I like the emotional bond, I like the creativity, without explaining why exactly you like it. So that's the crux of it. So that's my first step. Break down your interest in the healthcare world into specific parts and tailor your experiences to explain this interest, right? As simple as that. So my second tip for you is make sure your personal statement covers multiple aspects of you and not just a specific part. So for instance, if you are a very strong applicant with amazing research projects, you wouldn't want to just focus on that throughout the entire personal statement. You can spend a significant amount of words on it, because the thing about medicine is that it's a profession which is very unique and it involves a lot of elements. So it's just not about the academic world or the serving people world. There are a lot of elements to it and you would want to cover as many as possible. So I like to keep it down to like 3 or 4 varied reasons why I want to apply to medical school, and make sure these 4 varied reasons covered different aspects of me. So the last important part of your application will be the referee reports. So you can't screw this up. So you need to pick your referee well and need to tell them in advance so that they are aware of you applying to medical school. Usually medical school applicants just use their teachers. If you want to explore other options, you can use like a volunteer group leader that you have, or for example, you can just use the doctor that you shadowed under. So one of the biggest warnings that I want to give you is make sure the referee knows you very well. Okay, so you're not helping your application by shadowing a doctor for 3 days and asking him for a recommendation. It would be much better if you actually got a teacher to write instead of a doctor who probably sounds prestigious on your application, but it won't mean anything because the words that he writes down is not representative of who you are. So that's basically it for the medicine portfolio. So it's actually kind of simple. The personal statement is definitely going to take much of your time. You crafting it again and again and again will be something very normal. I took probably 8 drafts to perfect mine. So definitely take your time. It's perfectly okay. So get some feedback from your guidance counselors if you have, from your friends, your seniors who got into medical school. That would just be an amazing way for you to improve your personal statement and make sure you have a much better version by the time you apply for medical school. So after you submit the portfolio, you actually have some time to take a break before you get called back for 2 things. Number 1 will be the situational judgment test, which is a pen and paper test where you go down to NUS, shade a few bubbles and come back. Number 2 will be your interview itself, which is called the focused skills assessment, if I'm not wrong. Let me just do a quick search. Yeah, that's what it's called, focused skills assessment, which is essentially your interview. Let me just go through the simple thing first, which is the SJT, the situational judgment test. It's actually a very simple test, so there's not much to prepare for it. So what they like to do is test you on different medical scenarios, and they want you to place yourself into those scenarios, right? And see if you make the ethically right decision. So it's actually quite simple and intuitive, honestly. Before you go in for the test, I want you to understand 2 things. It is not a personality test or any test with no right answer. So as much as they say there's no right answer, you have to understand they are assessing you for it. There might not be a specific right answer, but there are wrong ones. Besides that, it's not a test of knowledge. Don't go studying your O-level bio or your A-level bio trying to prepare for this test, because it has nothing to do with it. If you're really afraid, look at the school website and understand how the question is formatted and things like that. Now we reached the important part, the FSA or the interview. This is something that you have to prepare for from very early on. Even before you get the invite to come down for the interview, you should be starting to prepare for this. I have to warn you that I have to walk on eggshells right now, because every single applicant who goes through the interview process signs this non-disclosure agreement where we can't reveal the specifics on what happened during our interview. I'll give you a very general sequence of events, I'll give you how to prepare for the interviews and what exactly you have to do. Okay, so I found this infographic on the NUS Medical School website itself, and this is very helpful because this is exactly what happens on the actual day. So we have the role play station, you have the task-based station, and you have the group station, and you have the interview station. So what I want you to do is really take some time, pause this video if you have to, and read the various descriptions for each of the stations. So as you can see, it's kind of fairly simple on what goes on in each of the station. Now what I want to dive into is how exactly you prepare for each individual station, because there are different ways to do so. First of all, role play station. This is something very unique. So what you want to do is actually tap into resources online like YouTube. For me, I used Karma Medic and Ali Abdal's videos to actually get me through this. So there are amazing channels out there that you have to actually watch constantly and try to emulate their style of responding to different scenarios. So what I don't want you to do is memorize what they say. The topic is on explaining to a blind individual how a Ferris wheel looks. What I want you to look out for is the body movement, the gestures that they use, and what kind of specific words or phrases that these guys use. So saying something like, I understand where you're coming from, or why not consider this perspective? You want to be as compassionate and understanding as much as possible. So make sure your words, your gestures, your body movements all point in that direction. On that day, definitely scenarios will be much different because the scenarios change year on year. You really have to get comfortable with the idea of role playing in front of a person. They may even cry in front of you. They may be very angry. They may respond negatively to what you say. You have to be calm and make sure you employ the skills that you learn through these YouTube videos and really deploy them on the spot. Okay, so that was that for the roleplay station. The next is the task-based station. I found that to be the most challenging station of all of them because essentially they're trying to test your ability to keep calm and composed in the most difficult of situations, because usually a doctor actually faces that on a day-to-day basis. So they're trying to replicate that experience and scenario over in this station. It's kind of intuitive. You have to do many hard, complex things in a short period of time. The objective is actually not to complete all of the tasks. It's to ensure you understand what exactly you're doing and have a plan for whatever you're doing. So don't go in just doing the first ever task that you see. It may be the hardest task or the easiest task. You never know, right? So take a second or two to understand what exactly you have to dive straight into, what you can multitask with and what you can't, whether multitasking is even a good idea to begin with. Always go in with a game plan. I can't emphasize this more. Most often than not, you actually won't really complete many tasks. That's that for the task station actually. So you can't really pretty much prepare for it. If you really want to, you can actually practice doing many things at one point in time, but like what I said, they're not testing you for that. They're testing you for your ability to keep calm. Okay, so next we'll move on to the group station. Honestly, this is one of the easier stations from personal experience. So one thing I want to get across is don't view your peers as competition. Okay, so it's highly important for you to not be the guy who voices out his opinions all the time, to be the guy voicing out all the plans and forcing your plans onto the other group members. So this won't work out well for you, honestly. So you're better off actually helping each other out. For example, if you find out that this other teammate has not voiced out his opinion throughout the entire group station task, right? You can actually say it out loud. For example, like, hey, you can probably contribute, and what is your idea, kind of thing. And this will go a long way for you and whoever you helped. My biggest advice is don't make the application process harder than what it already is. So help each other out. Don't view your peers as competition. Instead, try to help them in every way possible. And a simple action like that actually shows a lot about you and about how you care about people's opinions and how you work amazingly well in teams. So that's exactly what they're testing for. So that's pretty much it for the group station actually. Finally, we reached the interview station. The interview station is the station that you have the most control of, so you can prepare the most for it too. So what they can ask you about is your personal statement, your purpose, motives, why you want to study medicine, what your strengths, what your weaknesses are, what exactly you want to get out of being a doctor. Essentially, understanding who you are, what you have done for the past few years, and things like that, right? The common interview questions that are out there is something easy to prepare for. My biggest tip for you guys is to probably just get a few interview questions online, write out this full document. So what I did was copy pasted a lot of these interview questions, typed it out over a Google document, and answered every question in like point form. You don't want to write it in prose because you start to get fixated on what you have to say. Read every single word of your personal statement and make sure you understand every part of it. For example, if you put in a research project, make sure you know your research project very well. They will ask you questions about it. For example, you mentioned like a disease, let's say basal cell carcinoma. Understand the basic characteristics of the disease, understand where is it usually found, and understand how it manifests itself and what kind of symptoms. They don't really expect you to know a lot about it because that's what you learn in medical school, right? They expect you to know to the amount that you did research on. I mean, if you did a research project on it, you should have the basic knowledge about the specific thing that you're researching on. That applies to other things like volunteering too. Make sure you have a key experience. So if you volunteered at NUH, right, have a significant experience that you can talk about. So make sure every single thing that you wrote in your personal statement is something that you can talk about when the interview picks it up. That's pretty much it for the interview station actually. At the end of the day, as one of my friends wrote in his blog, they're not looking for the perfect applicant who complete all the tasks, the perfect applicant who answered every single role-playing scenario very well, and the person who can actually give the perfect model answers to every interview question. They're looking for someone who they would love to teach, because some of these interviewers are the profs in the school themselves. So they would look out for students who they want to teach. They want to look out for students who are keen on understanding different parts of medicine and really want to become a doctor for the right reasons. So if you're genuine about becoming a doctor, be confident that you will actually show that enthusiasm during the interview and you will probably even get a spot. Speaking of my friend's blog, I would definitely recommend you to check it out. It's amazingly designed. So basically, it's the same thing. It's just this YouTube video in a blog format, and he segments it and writes it very well. I'll drop down the link below so you can just check it out. So that's pretty much it for NUS, right? Now we'll move on to NTU. I won't go through the NTU's application with that same amount of detail because a lot of it is very similar to NUS. So I will just go through the specific requirements that are different and the differences between NUS and NTU. So first of all, the personal statement is not 500 words with NTU, it's 300 words. So that would mean you have to compress a lot of what you want to say within those 300 words. But don't worry, every single applicant is facing the same struggles as you. Beyond that, if you are keen on applying for the Aptitude-based Admissions scheme with NTU, it's pretty much fairly the same process with NTU and NUS. But the key difference is you have to write an additional essay over here with NTU that you don't have to do with NUS. So the essay is on achievements beyond school's co-curricular activities. If you're actually looking at this scheme, you should have a special interest in something beyond what you do in school. So let's talk about the big difference, the BMATs, right? So for those who are looking to apply to NTU this year, you should have already taken your BMAT last October or November. So if you have not done so yet, you can't apply for NTU Medical School this year, and you have to wait out for the next application cycle. If you're keen on applying for the next application cycle, be sure to take your BMAT this October. Most schools usually help you out with the application and everything. So just contact your school guidance counselor for it. And if you're really unsure, I'll probably make a video on this if you guys are interested. So regarding the scores and the cutoff points for the BMAT, is something that I've already gone through just now in the video. You just have to make sure you meet those cutoff points and you should be fine. There pretty much aren't many differences actually with the rest of the application. So the other big difference with NTU and NUS is that NTU does not have the SJT, the situational judgment test. So if your grades make it, your personal statement makes it, your BMAT scores make it, you will be directly pushed over to the interview, which is called the multiple mini interview stage. The MMIs are, like what it says, short multiple interviews. So they're around 8 interviews if I'm not wrong, and they test you on different role-playing, task-based stations, the basic personal statement interview station, and things like that. I heard this is much more hands-on. You may have to do a lot more role-playing and things like that. So it's short but very intensive, but the concepts and how you're going to prepare for it, it's something very similar to what I talked about for the NUS FSA. Finally, let's get to Duke-NUS Medical School. I won't be going into much detail on the application process for Duke-NUS Medical School itself because I'm not really very familiar with it. But from the research I did, the interviews are pretty much similar to NTU and NUS, but don't take my word for it. Do your own research. So what I want to go in depth actually is I want you guys to understand the different special pathways that are there to get into Duke-NUS Medical School. There are people out there who come to me and tell me they didn't meet their cutoff points because A-levels and IBs didn't go as well as they thought it would. So Duke-NUS Medical School is an amazing second chance to get into medical school. But I think it's way more than that. I like how it's trying to get diverse set of people from different backgrounds and trying to get them to become doctors. I like the idea of it because that forces different people with different ideas to come together to solve and push the healthcare frontiers. And it's a very interesting concept actually. What I want you to specifically look at is the special pathways that they have. So they collaborate with schools like SMU, SUTD, and even Yale NUS and NUS Engineering Program. I placed the link which mentions all the different special pathways to get into Duke Medical School in the description below, and just look out for it. Just give it a quick read. Even if you are applying for the undergraduate level medicine program, just try to expand your horizons and really understand more about Singapore medical school scenes and everything. So one fun fact about Duke-NUS Medical School is that it focuses on creating clinician scientists. So if you guys are interested in the research world and the idea of being a doctor, this might be a better fit for you actually compared to NTU and NUS. All in all, I think the biggest tip I can ever give you is start early, get a lot of feedback from people, practice, practice, practice. So this works for your interview, for your personal statement, and many other things like preparing for the BMAT and things like that, right? So if you really, really want to be a doctor, make things work for you, and I'm sure you can definitely become one. So I really hope to see some of you guys go on to the white coat ceremony together with me. Hope to see you guys more. I'll probably even try to create more YouTube videos on this if you guys like it. And please try to subscribe and give it a like if you guys found this helpful. Thank you so much.